Welcome to Ghost Stories Online. This week's episode is coming out later than normal as a test to see if a later release time affects views. This week's story is about the Douglas House. Rochester's legacy as a home of alternative ideas helps explain the sojourn of a famous American. One of the most illustrious voices ever raised against slavery came into the world with a howl in 1818 on the eastern shore of Maryland. Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey may have been part white, but he took the last name of his slave mother, Harriet. The man we would eventually know as Frederick Douglass renamed himself for a character in Scott's Lady of the Lake and led one of the most remarkable lives of the 19th century. To cut a fine saga brutally short, Douglass escaped from slavery and became an abolitionist, a publisher, a public servant, and an international celebrity. Via the Underground Railroad, which was so prominent in the Genesee Valley, Douglass helped hundreds to freedom. He knew many of the leaders of his day, but his closest contact was with abolitionists and social reformers, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton, William Lloyd Garrison, John Brown, and Susan B. Anthony. The Flower City grew to admire his abolitionist paper, North Star, whose motto would not be out of place today. Right is of no sex. Truth is of no color. God is the Father of us all, and we are all brethren. A statue of Douglass, the first in the nation to honor a Black American, was erected here in 1899. 25 of Douglass's prime years were spent in Rochester. I shall always feel more at home there than anywhere else in the country, he wrote. Maybe that explains the modest two-story house on Hamilton Street, close to the river and near Interstate 490. Douglass owned other Rochester buildings in which he may not have lived. Most of them are no longer standing. The house on Hamilton Street was owned by Douglass's daughter, Rosetta. Her father was listed as a boarder. He, or something like him, may return today. An interesting article appeared in the Associated Press in June 2005, written by Ben Dobbin. A historian had visited the house in 2003, hoping to document Douglass's time in Rochester. South Carolina transplants, the Dukes family had been there since 1973. They knew nothing about Douglass, but the late Lee Dukes had told his wife that he'd seen a ghost, a well-dressed black man working at his bedroom desk. The sightings had started in 1986. He described a black guy with gray hair, a gray beard, and a top hat, always busy with his head down, constantly writing, always flipping pages, his wife recalled. She didn't have much faith in ghosts, but she had an inkling that the great abolitionist had some connection to her house. She showed her non-academic husband a book of Douglass. "That's him. That's the guy," he shouted. As of 2005, Mrs. Dukes had never experienced Douglass's supernatural presence, and the reason may be a light-hearted conversation with her late husband that meant so much years later. Mrs. Dukes asked her husband, when he went into spirit, to tell the ghost in their house not to show himself. Because I'm afraid, she said. I'll do that, he assured her with a laugh. He may be keeping his word. So, was the ghost of Frederick Douglass still in the house? We may never know. That concludes this week's ghost story. If you did enjoy this video, please remember to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and turn notifications on, so then you get every ghost story each week. Thank you again for listening to Ghost Stories Online.